Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Kenny Conversation, brought to you by JEGS, the leader in high-performance aftermarket car parts. Remember to go to jegs.com, and you're looking at him, and we're celebrating today 65 years at JEGS, and Jamie McMurray. We're having a Kenny Conversation with you, and today is the 65th anniversary of JEGS. Welcome.
I I would think, Kenny, you would do that intro just once, like really good, and just copy and paste that. But you do it every time.
You know what's funny is I would think so too, and we do the same thing over there on Herman Schrader.
Yeah.
Uh, well, we're pretty lucky now, Jamie, because we're collaborating with Dirty Mo, so you'll be on the Dirty Mo podcast, which is good, and then of course, on the Kenny Conversation YouTube show. So I don't know, maybe one day we'll get to that. But well, first of all, you're somewhere. The background just looks beautiful. Where are we talking to you from?
I'm just at home. Yeah, this live in I live in Mooresville. Yeah, so this is
Yeah,
just at our house. This is our
yeah,
living room.
yeah. Beautiful home, beautiful ceiling. A lot of work put into that. Well, that's awesome. Sometimes when we do these interviews on the YouTube, they know what you look like, but they're trying to find the secrets out. So they're looking in the
Yeah. Yeah,
background
well
and
there's no secret here. Yeah, I
yeah,
promise you. Yeah.
yeah.
No
Well,
secret
Jamie,
here.
we want to celebrate you. I called you up. I want to thank you for doing Kenny Conversation. You've had a wonderful racing career, and we're going to remind everybody what you've done. But let's start out like this. Jamie McMurray, 48 years old, and this is one I want to zone in on right away. You are from Joplin, Missouri, right? Kind of right up the road from me. I'm
Yeah.
in St. Louis, Missouri. Joplin, Missouri. How in the world did you start your racing career?
Well, my dad did, he raced everything. Like, he raced drag racing cars, he did stock cars, and he was like, I always joked around that he's kind of like the Sanford son of racing because he was just always buying and selling. And like
Yeah.
as a kid, I never had the same go-kart 2 or 3 weeks in a row because he would always sell it and buy something different. Sometimes it worked in my favor, sometimes it worked against me. But I loved racing as a kid. I remember watching him as just my dad kind of growing up racing, and we started doing go-karts when I was 8. And it's so different now. I feel like kids these days they always ask me like, how'd you get started? And I remember going to the go-kart track and there was like 3 kids I was racing. So just
Mm.
because you won doesn't really mean you did a whole lot. They're just, racing has become, well, not just racing. I would say that every form of like activity is professional now. If your kid does baseball or soccer, you hire a coach now. It's just different than it used to be. But yeah, so I grew up racing go-karts and we did it as a family, and of course I'm going through that now with my kid. My dad loved it, right? Like we would just go as a family, and my wife will look back at my life and she'll be like, you didn't really have a childhood. She's like, who were your friends? And I've tried to explain to her, I'm like, my friends were at the racetrack. Like I went to the racetrack, and even though these kids, I didn't go to school with them every day, I saw them every weekend, and we went to the racetrack and we were just friends. And I wouldn't say a typical childhood, but looking back, like, I mean, it was just, I can't imagine it being any more fun than what it was getting to grow up racing karts.
Man, I want to stay right there if you don't mind. We're going to get to your son Carter. I know you have a daughter Hazel, of course, your wife Christy. I want to
Mhm.
acknowledge him. We're going to talk about Carter in just a minute, but boy, that amazes me. I want to stay right there, and then we're going to get to your incredible NASCAR career. Um, do you think everything is overanalyzed now with the invention of the cameras and data?
Mm.
I mean, even go karts are insane. Is it? Are we more hyper sensitive now to every little thing than we were, say, 20 years ago?
It's just different. And I think it's really hard for me to answer that because I think if I would have grown up, or like, it's hard with my son because I know right from wrong on so many things. And we watch a race on TV at home, and I'll point out like, well, here's what happened there. And so it's different. Like, I think if I were just, a banker and my kid raced, like they don't get that same experience of learning. So when you ask that about the data and the cameras and all that, I don't know any different. And so that's very
Yeah.
normal to me. And so when I go over stuff with my son, it's probably at a much higher level than most dads are going to do because they don't know the difference in that. So I don't know. I wish that racing were as simple as it was when I was a kid. I
Yeah.
wish that you just like got in I just remember we had like a junky old trailer or a pickup truck, and you just threw it in and you went racing and you had all your junk in there. And it's just different now. Everything is very professional, and like you go to the go-kart races and everybody has a coach, and
Oh
there's
my.
video and there's data. It's much more advanced, but I mean, kids are just way more prepared now than I played soccer and baseball. I did all kinds of stuff growing up and I raced also. Now, and I hate to say it, I'm that parent because, I've told my son, I'm like, if you want to race, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it the best we can. We're not going to just kind of race or kind of do that. I'm like, you pick something and we're going to get really good at it. And I don't care what that is, but that's our plan.
I feel like when I go back, say 6 years ago, and I feel confident saying this, when I look at Dale Jr. or I look at Chase Elliott, I feel like that they absorbed growing up with Dale Sr. or Chase Elliott absorbed growing up with Bill Elliott. It's like these two drivers, Dale Jr. And of course Chase. And now I'm looking at your son Carter. He's got a wonderful Instagram page, and I want to talk about that. I feel like now this is me, straighten me out. I feel like Carter is doing the same thing that Dale Jr. and Chase Elliott did. I think Carter's absorbing you, and right away he's just going to be way better than if he didn't hang out with you. What do you think about that analogy?
Well, I've often wanted to ask, because here's the thing. Dale Jr. has no idea what it's like to grow up without a famous father. Like he doesn't know, like, and I've listened to his story, and of course there's goods and bads that come with all that. But I always, like, every time I'm around Dale or Ryan Blaney or Chase Elliott, I always kind of like ask questions like, what's that like? Because they don't know what it's like to be on the other side, and I don't know what it was like to grow up as them. And I ask those questions because
Mm.
I'm kind of curious for Carter's perspective on things. Like, well,
Oh,
like
good
it's
point.
just it's
Yeah.
just different, and I have told Carter, I'm like, listen, there will be so many great things that come from you being my kid. And I said, there'll also be some obstacles from you being my kid. I'm like, it's just the reality of it, like everyone's just gonna, like, I think that people assume that I have an endless bank account and
Mm.
that I just buy him everything, and it's not the
Yeah.
case. Like, I tell him all the time, I'm like, listen, I try to express to him, the cost of all this, and I have beat in his head, Kenny, that you can be the greatest driver and it doesn't mean you'll make it. But if you're a good salesman, you'll make it because that's just the reality of this. If you can sell yourself and market yourself, as long as you have the funding, you'll always get to race a car. But the flip side of that, I mean, there's just very few, and I think Larson's a great example, or maybe a Christopher Bell who's hot right now. Didn't come for money, right? They kind of raced their way through, but there's not many of people that can pull that off.
Yeah. So we've established how you got in racing. I like it that your dad, kind of like a Sanford and Son, which was a great sitcom where they were always buying and selling. I have a
Yeah.
friend like that. I have a friend like that, Kyle Hammer. Kyle Hammer up here in Farmer City, Illinois. I'm like, Kyle, you need to get a name because they are doing exactly that. They buy, sell, buy, sell.
Yeah.
And but listen, it's a good way to stay racing. I want to switch. I want to stay in the same category early in your career. Um, I grew up in Rolla, Missouri, not far from Joplin. And some of the great names in your era when you were a child was Larry Phillips, Mark Martin. Of course, now we're getting closer to Carl Edwards, but we can draw a circle around Joplin, Missouri, and we can say some NASCAR Hall of Famers, Carl Edwards, Larry Phillips, Mark Martin. You go a little bit further, we go Kenny Schrader, Rusty Wallace. When you won the Daytona 500, I got a call from Terry Phillips, which is Larry's son. And he says, Herman, can you give me Jamie's phone number? I said, oh, now you want to talk to him. And Terry said to me, Terry Phillips said, I raced with Jamie. So just fast forward from your father days to tell me about your early racing career up around an area where so many Hall of Famers come from. What did you know about that area?
Well, I mean, like I knew of Rusty and Mark, but they were, by the time I made it to racing stock cars, they were already at the cup level. So like I was never gonna, I was never gonna meet them, and I was never gonna race against them. But Larry Phillips, the name you mentioned, Larry lived through a lot of generations of
Yeah.
guys, and he was, I mean, he was the guy for me to beat. Like when I started racing modifieds in like Lebanon and Bolivar, Larry was winning all these late model races. And I just remember getting out of my car in the modified race, and you would run up the hill to watch the late model race. And it wasn't
Yeah.
if Larry would win, it was how many laps it would take for him to go. They'd make him start last every week. And it was how many laps it would take for him to get to the lead. It was
Yeah.
incredible. And of course, in hindsight, looking back at that, Larry was just so far ahead of everyone. Like Larry was an incredible driver, but he was smart and he knew how to set a car up. He knew he was building he built his own cars. And that was just, at that level, no one does that. But um it was a really big deal for me when I got to start racing late models. I mean, I just remember being nervous in the car, being around him, because
Yeah.
he's just so good, he's so fast. We'd get in those long races, and everyone's heard these stories, but I just remember being in those long races, and he'd flip a cigarette out the window like
Yes.
halfway
Yes.
through, and it really happened. Like you run those like 75 lappers, and he couldn't make it under caution. He'd light a cigarette up, and I'll never forget. We had a restart in Lebanon, and we took off, and Larry was in front of me, and I'm just driving my tail off, trying to keep up with him. And we ran like 2 laps under green, and then the cigarette came out the window, and I'm like, "That guy's been smoking while we were racing," you know? But he always wore that open face helmet, and so it was easy, right? Like, but Larry was incredible. I mean, I look back through my career at legends I got to race, and for me as a kid, like, I wouldn't say Larry was my hero, but when I made it to stock cars, he was just the guy to beat, and I loved that I got to race against him and be able to beat him. I mean, that was about as good as it got being a kid from Missouri.
What do you think it is about that era when we look at guys like Richie Evans from the Northeast, Dick Trickle, Larry Phillips? They all smoked. Do you think that was a nervous habit, or did they think it was cool, or that's just
I
what
don't
was the
know.
deal?
No, I don't know. I don't know. Like but you think back, everybody smoked. I mean, like
Yeah,
everybody smoked. I don't know why. It's so gross, but everybody did
yeah,
it. I mean, it's that whole, but that's such a, when you think about the like late 70s, the 80s, kind of early 90s, there was that generation of those guys you mentioned that were ahead of everyone else. Like
yeah,
they were the next level, and the thing that's different now is I don't think it's near as important for drivers now to know what their car does. You have sim now, and you need to work on your lines and studying film, and it's changed so much on. I just think that when I was a kid growing up, you had to know what all the things did to your car because you had to change them. Like if you went out and practice and you needed less stagger, you thought you needed wedge or the track bar, whatever that was, I did it. Like I'm like, I don't know, I'm loose. I'm either gonna lower the track bar or put some wedge in. Like you just raced that way,
yeah.
and you know what I mean? Like
Oh
that's how you
yeah.
did it. And now when you get to where they have sim, you don't have to know all that. You just tell them where it's tight or loose at and they fix it. It's just so much different.
Man, you are so much fun to have a conversation with. And I always show everybody, I've got boatload of notes, but you give me so much material to go on. And I know we only got so much time. But that is an era now that I'm sure you're teaching Carter. And let's go to Carter right now. We've established where you're from, We've established who you raced with, the greats. And let's go. Okay, what about Christy? Let's start with Christy. You met your wife. Where did you meet her in North Carolina or
I mean, it's a long story that I'll make brief, but I met my wife 2 years before we actually talked. I ran into her in a restaurant with some friends. Christy was only 17 or 18 at the time, and I was like
wow?
25. And I remember seeing her, and I thought she was like just the most beautiful girl. And I
Mm,
was like, that's what I thought my wife would look like. I remember that.
that's awesome.
And like 2 years later, I was with some friends on a boat on the lake, and we went and picked some girls up, and she got on the boat. And
Wow.
I was like, "Oh my God, that's that girl." And I remember I had a couple beers in me, so I had a little buzz. And I was like, "Boy," I'm like, "you need to make sure when you talk to her, you don't mess this up." And so we started dating, and um, Christine doesn't really know anything about racing. She followed me through my whole career. She was not very engaged in it, and that's what I loved about her. Like I felt like she liked me for me. If that, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
Oh yeah.
she didn't care about sitting on a pit box. She didn't care about being in the limelight. I just felt like she liked me. And it's still that way. Even like with Carter's racing, like she's involved. Like she's taking him to the track now, but she's not a super competitive person. And when we come home, and it's been this way, I mean, I've been with Christy for 20 years now, and we don't talk about racing when we come home. It's really interesting, and I enjoyed that because it was a great way to come home and just get away from all of it.
Is it fair to say? I mean, the reason I'm asking this question is kind of like my wife. Same thing. Is Christy your safe space where you can just be with her and chill out?
Yeah, and I just think that, and she also has a different perspective on everything than I do. And I like that. I like that I can say something to her or just listen to her talk, and I'm like, I didn't see that side of it, but I do now. And so, yeah, I think I mean, yeah, and she's really like I used to joke around when, gosh, you're a cup driver, you flying on a private plane, you're doing everything, right? It's just life's
Yeah.
good. And you show up to the track, and it's race day, and you go do these appearances, and they just treat you like royalty. You go up there, you sign an autograph. I'm like, I don't know why anybody wants my autograph, but also that's part of my deal. I just sign these
Yeah.
autographs, and I would tell everyone when we get in these suites, I'm like, I was like, "This is pretty awesome," but I was like, "When we go home tonight, my wife's gonna tell me to take the trash cans out." I'm like,
Yes.
that's my
Yes.
life."
Yes.
I was like, "I get to live this, like, rock star life, but when I go home, I'm just Jamie the dad or Jamie the husband, and I do all the same things you do." Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I do. I think Christy's awesome, and it looks like that. You know, when you're looking at you two, uh, there's beautiful pictures of you and her at awards banquet. She looks chill. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
she is.
I
Yeah.
am happy for you. Yeah, she doesn't look like she's maintenance. Let's put it that way.
No, no.
She's awesome. Okay,
Mhm,
your daughter Hazel.
mhm,
Um, so you got a boy and a girl.
mhm.
Man, from the outside,
Pretty
this
good.
looks you got it going on. Tell me
Yeah.
about Hazel. What's she up to?
Hazel's into horses.
Oh
And
wow.
it's crazy, Kenny, because Christy and I just aren't into the barn scene at all. You know what I mean? Like, it's
No,
so
yeah.
dirty, it stinks. Like,
Dirt racing.
we're so not into that. And we took Hazel to a birthday party at a barn near our house, and she fell in love with horses. And
Yeah.
she loves it, and she loves riding, she loves the maintenance, she loves the social aspect of being at this barn. And she'll go up and work 2 or 3 hours a day at a barn, and she doesn't even know she's working because she's having so much fun. And it's just the sweetest thing. And girls are I shouldn't say girls and boys, 'cause that's not fair, because every kid is different. Carter and Hazel our kids are kind of the opposites. Like, Hazel's chatty Cathy. She loves the social scene. She loves just hanging with people. And Carter's like the opposite. Our Carter's me. Like, Carter and I can ride in a car together for 5 hours and not acknowledge each other. Like,
Oh
we
my
just like
gosh. Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
we do talk, but like that's my relationship with Christy
Your
too.
brain's
Like,
going. Your brain's
yeah,
going.
we just like, yeah, and so it's just two different, but it's great. I mean, like, it's so cool, and
Yeah.
I love that Hazel's found something. Like, I mean, as a parent, what you want are your kids to find a passion. something
Yeah.
that they look forward to every day. And for Hazel, that was horses.
Yeah, that makes me happy because I'm Chatty Kenny, and
Yeah,
and
I know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that makes me happy. It really does. And sometimes when kids are real quiet, I say to myself, "Why is that?" I guess I sometimes try to find why they're quiet. But you're the first person I've heard that version from. You're happy with it. You both are thinking. You're just driving down the road.
Well, I do. Well, no, it's fair. Like I do this. I mean, I do that with him too. I'm like, "Are you okay?" Right when people are quiet, you're like,
We haven't
"Are
talked in 100
are you,
miles.
it's been a couple hours. Are we doing okay over there?" I exaggerated that a little bit, but I just mean,
It's good.
with my daughter, you get in the car and every parent knows this. You're like, "Oh my God, stop talking for 5 seconds. Like just stop talking for 5 seconds so I can think." And Carter's just the
Right.
opposite. You're like, "Are you okay over there?" Yeah. Just different.
I love
Mm,
that. Okay,
mm.
we are going to go to Carter now and spend a little more time about him. I, you and I have had this long distance relationship. I'm wild. You're kind of like Rusty. You're like my big brother. You're very focused, and sometimes I shock people. They don't know what to think about me. They're like, oh damn, here he comes again. Um, so when I go on Instagram, I see this incredibly well produced Instagram page, Carter McMurray one. And I even texted you and I said, Jamie, this Instagram page is out of sight. So, first of all, everybody go to Carter's Instagram page because you can see what he's doing. And boy, it's really good. So Carter, let's just start right there. Carter wanted to race. Do you remember when he
Oh
said,
yeah.
"Yeah"? Tell me
Oh
the
yeah.
moment.
We were. It's funny you say Instagram, and I will blame Clint Boyer and Kyle Larson because they bought their kids go karts, and their
Oh,
kids are quite a bit younger. Well, not quite a bit younger. They're 2 years younger, 3 years younger than Carter, and because he was into golf, we did football. He loves football. Like he would totally play football if his mom would let him.
mm.
Um, but they had bought their kids go-karts and I just remember on the couch and he's like, "Could we get a go-kart?" And I kind of looked at Christy and I was like, "Oh no." I'm like, "I don't That's just a terrible road to go down for us because it'll be very hard for me to just go have fun riding go-karts."
You'll be buying the $30,000
Right.
trailer.
Well, actually, I will tell you, I did the opposite. When I bought Carter his first cart, I bought an old go-kart. It was new, but it had never been put together, and I got a deal on it. I bought a Briggs engine, which is $1,000, and we just went and would go ride and ride and ride and ride. And what you forget, what I did not realize as a parent and someone that had driven, because Carter had been around racing his whole life, is that they don't know anything. You go to
Mm.
the racetrack and like they just don't. You just think they're gonna know everything, and they don't. And so there's a frustration level that comes with that. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't know." And I'm like, "Well, how do you not know?" And he's like, "I'm 10." I'm like,
Okay, stop right there. I got to interrupt you. So I was watching one of the videos on Instagram, and you said this is maybe 2 years ago. You said, "I have to remind myself that he looks like a man." You said Carter looks like a man, but at the time you said he's only 13. I think now
yeah.
he's 15. But do you remember when you said that?
Yeah, so he's 14 now. Here's what happened is that, and you know this because you knew me when I
Yeah.
was younger. I've always been a little kid, right? Like I've never been. I was always on the smaller side. And when I was 16, I looked 12, and when I was 12, I looked 8. I was just this little
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
Carter's not. Carter's bigger than me now, and he's 14 years old, and he's always been on the bigger end, and so. Yeah, you look at him and he looks like a man, but he's still just a boy,
I love
like,
this.
and so like I would yell at him, not yell, I would like discipline him and I'm like, listen, I'd get mad and I would see his eyes like, and I'm like, oh my God, Jamie, I'm like, you gotta
He's
remember
a
he's only
child.
he's only 13. Yeah. And those are good moments as a parent though to kind of take that all in and yeah, it's a lesson.
So we're already 20 minutes into this, so I think I'm going to have to start fast forwarding a
Okay.
little bit. Okay, so Carter has become a great race car driver. I'm going to use the word great because I watch. I watch the go-kart races. Uh, he's very disciplined, stays in line when we're drafting, analytical. It's like he's a machine in his head already. But so we get through the go-kart phase, and now Carter just got done making his smart modified tour debut in Florence, South Carolina. So it's fair to say, here he is, you said 14 years old, and he's already in the big cars. He started 15th and he finished fifth. I don't care how you race. I don't care about anything. That's hard to do. Tell me about, was it a week or two ago that this happened? Tell me about this moment, the smart modified debut for your son.
Well, if I just have to back up a little bit, I would always get a little frustrated with parents that move their kids up too early.
Mm,
And I've watched a lot of kids at 12, 14 years old getting these late models and wreck everybody, destroy everything. And I was like, I'm never going to be that parent. And you have to be really careful saying things like that because we all turn into that parent. But part of the reason that we moved up, when I say we, Carter and I, is because in karting, size is everything and
mm,
big's almost never better. And
good
so
point.
we had to move up from like the smaller kids too early, I think, because he was too big for the carts, like the kid carts or the cadet carts. And then we had to go from like the juniors to the senior class too young as well because Carter got too big. And so you can still do it at that age, but you can't do it well because you're at a disadvantage arrow wise. You're at a disadvantage in like the weight transfer in a cart. So I had to move him up to the men's class in karting last year at age 13 because he was just too big. Like he actually did better against the men than he did the kids because just physically he's just big. And I really didn't have any intentions of this modified thing, but I've got some people that work within NASCAR that have been helping me with Carter, and they have been on me really hard to move him up. And the other thing that I've learned as a parent is that, and I'm gonna kind of go against what I said a second ago, where you say kids don't know anything. Kids learn really fast. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable how fast they pick up on things. And so they're like, listen, you need to get him into like a late model, or you need to get him into this. And we did the modifieds. I have no background in modifieds. I did that in Lebanon and Bolivar, but it was these IMCA modifieds that they just put pavement tires on and a sway bar. Like it was just a dirt car with a sway bar on it, basically.
Yeah.
And so, what Carter's doing under these, it's a touring type modified. It has those massive tires on it and a huge engine. And I did that because it's significantly more affordable than a late model is. And
Mm,
I felt like he was going to get as much experience at 100 lap races, saving tires, everything that goes with that, and I could do it at a significantly cheaper rate than, and it's just, it's about learning. And I have told Carter, and this is, I think, hard for people to process, but like we did legend cars last year, and then we're going to do a little bit of that this year, but we're doing this modified. And I've told Carter, I'm like, I don't ever want you to become the best at anything. I'm like, I want to move you up so that you're always challenged in what you're doing. I was like, I hope you can win quick, but I was like, we're never going to stay somewhere long enough for you to become good at it
mm.
because I just want you to always have to, work harder than others to have success. Because eventually, when you get to the top level, it will get easier for you because all of a sudden your experience level is going to almost be on par with where they are, and you will had to have worked harder than everyone else getting to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I remember Bobby Allison telling my big brother Rusty. Bobby Allison said, "When you are no longer good in the late models, you will be really good in the Cup Series." Bobby Allison felt like if Rusty was really good in the ASA type cars, the stock cars tour, Bobby just had that theory. So I'm just saying that every man has a theory about how to go about to be good. You both are in the same
Yeah.
realm. You
Yeah.
both are in the same realm of thinking, maybe not identical, but
Yeah.
hey, I just want to acknowledge something for everybody out there. Man, I remember you going to Daytona International Motor Speedway with go-karts, the lay
Mhm.
down carts. I mean, wow. There's so much to Jamie McMurray, everybody, and you know we just can't get to it all. Maybe there'll be a part two. Um, okay, so Carter's. I don't want to jump ahead, but man, from the outside looking in, I see. I mean, I kind of see this uh, Owen Larson. I see all these kids. I see yours maybe being. I think here we're gonna have another generation. I think your son Carter has everything it takes to be a NASCAR superstar. And I had somebody say, Kenny, why don't you start interviewing some of these kids? And I'm like, well, they're kids, I mean,
Yeah.
because we see them come and do. Jamie, do you see that? It was like yesterday we were, Chase Elliott was the new generation. Now they're men, you
Hey,
see
I
this new group.
remember I remember Chase and Ryan Blaney on pit
Yeah.
road. And I'm like, "Those parents are wackos." Like, "Those kids are never gonna it's so hard to make it to this level." I'm like, "They'll never I mean, how are they ever gonna make it?" And now they've both won a cup championship.
Crazy.
It is crazy. But I'm gonna tell you something about it. This has been really healthy for me as a driver because you think about how many parents came up to you, Kenny, over the years, and like, "How do I get my kid in racing? How do I do
Oh,
this? How do I
every
that?"
week. Every
And
week.
and I'm like, "I don't know." I just because there is no plan. There's no book that tells you how to do it, but it has made me significantly more sympathetic to all of those families and kids that are trying to make it because I have a massive head start on them, right? Like I kind of know these people within the industry and as I'm trying to move my kid up, it's hard, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost impossible to do it, and so, as I see all these young kids, I love watching them. I mean, I just I'm really into it now, and I know most of the younger generation that's moving up because Carter has either raced with them in karting, like, as we maybe they were like Connor Zilich, when we first started running at Trackhouse here, Connor Zilich had the garage right next to us, and he was just this little kid, right?
Mm.
And as he moved up, it's been so much fun for me to watch that path of how they do that. So it's been pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, even this Brexton Bush. I mean, I'm looking at your son, Carter McMurray, Brexton Bush, Kyle Larson's kid. I mean,
Yeah,
the list
Keelan.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keelan. Oh, yeah, Keelan Harvick. It's hard to
Yeah.
remember them all, but it looks to me like the ones that are really well advanced, real well oiled machines are Keelan Harvick and Brexton Bush. Wow, they are
Yep.
going to school right now, and those two they definitely look like champions in the making. But I think Carter, I really feel like Carter's right there with them from
Yeah.
the way I watch him race. Okay. Um, anything else you want to say about Carter?
No, no, I mean I would tell you that what I would tell all other parents out there that have kids that want to race is, and I remind myself of this all the time, is that it needs to be fun. Like as you're doing this, it
Mm,
can't be like I tell Carter all the time, I'm like, listen, we're gonna go do this, and if it works out, it works out. But like we need to enjoy the moment. Like it's because it is really racing is fun, right? And I feel like sometimes it turns into a job. And I just remind myself every weekend when we go do it, I'm like, "Who cares? Just have fun, enjoy the moment, and try to learn from it each weekend." Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for talking to me. We spent almost 30 minutes on the start of your life, and it's hard to do that. But I've
Yeah.
learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and now and I want everybody to know that we did this on purpose, and now it's time to celebrate the man you're looking at, one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion. I know it might sound weird to you, but Jamie McMurray. Hey, when I did Speed TV, we did NASCAR Victory Lane, and we're going to start celebrating you right now. Uh, I would watch you come into Victory Lane, and I remember joking with you. I said, Jamie, you don't ever win a normal race. You always win the biggest races NASCAR has to offer. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all Jamie's stats off, and then I'm going to want you to reply. So let's start like this. First of all, Jamie McMurray has won in all three divisions: trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. Now, if I'm wrong, you stop me. Yeah. So you have ran 799 NASCAR starts. That's a lot of racing. 584 Cup races, 190 Xfinity races, 25 truck races. That's 799 NASCAR starts. Okay. In the Cup Series, 7 Cup wins. Now, this is where it gives me goosebumps. Tells me how competitive you were. 169 top tens, 11 poles, or as we say in dirt racing, 11 quick time. Yeah, I love that. Xfinity, 8 wins, 70 top tens, 73 poles. Then you ran 25 truck races, got a truck win, 6 top tens, 3 poles. Now, that's just a baseline. Now I want to celebrate where I always teased with you. I said, Jamie, you never win a normal race. Listen to the races that Jamie has won. Now, this is just highlighting everyone. First of all, he's the 2003 NASCAR Cup Rookie of the Year. And now comes the big boys. 2010 Daytona 500 winner. 2010 Brickyard 400 winner at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Man, this one had to be hard. The 2013 Sprint All-Star race winner. That's like a 6-lap dash. That's getting it on. That's getting it on. And then this tells me, this comes back to like go-karting in Daytona. The 2015 Rolex, a Daytona 24-hour overall winner. That had to be wild in one of those cars. So Jamie, now that I've kind of said all that, you've had a chance to listen. What were you thinking about as I was reading off all those amazing stats?
So I would tell you that when you talk about the All-Star race, like a 6-lap dash, the year that I won that, the rules for that are so complicated. They change it every year. Like you don't even, and so we ran all of the segments, and I don't think I won any of the like first 3 segments. And I remember I got to come down pit road second, and it was how you came off of pit road. And I think I came out second also. But that was the year that we had the most downforce in NASCAR, like these massive spoilers and these huge front splitters. Like the cars just generated an insane amount of grip. We had like 900 horsepower. I don't know, it was a ton of horsepower. And I remember when I got the lead in that race, it was a 10-lap shootout. I remember I got the lead in that race, and you've run Charlotte. And I remember driving into turn 3, and I lifted for like a half a second, and I floored it, and I
Wow.
drove to the bottom of the racetrack, and I was like, "Oh my God, is this thing stuck?" And I ran 10 laps like that, just like qualifying laps. And I remember as it was like counting down, I'm like, my God, I'm gonna get $1,000,000. Like this is unbelievable, and I'm like, if the caution doesn't come out, it's gonna work, and it didn't, and that was, I mean, I would say of what the wins you rattled off, that's not the big one, but like that was something that stuck out to me as you were talking about that, just because I can, there's a few moments in my career that I hope I never forget. Like I
Yeah.
can close my eyes. One of them is coming off turn 4 for the Daytona 500. I can see the checker
Wow.
flag. I can see Dale Jr. behind me, and I remember that feeling, that sensation, and I'm like, I hope I never forget that. Another one is coming off of turn 2 at Indy for the Brickyard. And that straightaway is like 7 miles long, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
just wide open forever, right? I just remember I'm like, if I don't blow a tire out, I'm gonna win this thing. Like it's and I say that race because like of my 7 cup wins, 4 of them were on super speedways, and you don't know you've won until it's over. And sometimes even when it's over, you don't know if you've won. And the feeling of getting to know you had won for like 40 seconds and kind of savoring that, I mean, like they're just like those are memories that I hope that they never go away.
Do you think it's a coincidence? What I mean, sometimes we're riding along in our car or truck and it's just us, and we start thinking, have you ever was there ever a moment when all this was kind of over, in the last 5 years that you go, gosh, I wonder why I won the big ones? I think it's just unbelievable. It's almost like God gifted you. Here, let me lay it on a silver platter for you. In your second NASCAR Cup start ever, you're subbing for the injured Sterling Marlin, and I still feel this way when I wrote this. You literally shocked the racing world. You led 96 laps at Charlotte, and you won. So, what do you remember about that?
That was a really interesting weekend because they being the team. Remember Tony Glover, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Greatest guy ever. Glover was it was like a co-crew chief. It was he and Lee McCall on that car, and I told Glover we'd run Talladega the week before, and he was like, "Hey, we got a good setup for Charlotte," and I was like, "Well, I hope so, because that's not a very good track for me."
Oh,
I'm like,
cocky.
I'm like, I don't have. I was like Glover, that's my worst track, and he's like, no, he's like, when you get in these
Oh
cars,
wow.
it all makes sense. I'm like, okay. So we went to the track on that Friday because you used to do practice and qualifying on Friday. We did practice Kenny, and I was the slowest car in practice. I went out and did my. I remember. Well, I'd never driven a Cup car. Well, I'd driven on Talladega, but they have no power at Talladega. We went to Charlotte, and that was like that 900 horsepower time. And I remember leaving pit road, and I'm like, I've never sat in anything this fast in my whole life. I'm like, oh my God, my eyes were just like huge because I'm like, it's just so fast. And and so we were doing all we did were qualifying runs. And I'm pretty sure I was the slowest car. And Glover came over to me. You sit in your car. I come in after a qualifying run. I'm sitting in the car. They jack it up, and he put the window net down. And Glover's like, "Well, little buddy," he's like, "I think you're right." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're not very good here, are you?" And I'm like,
Oh my God.
I told you. And so listen, you'll find this interesting, I think. He was like, you got to go around the bump in turn 3. There's like a patch over there and you got to go around it. And I remember looking at him very dazed because I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I've never seen a bump. I don't know what he means. Well, it rained out qualifying, so I didn't have to qualify. And
Thank
the
God.
next day, yeah, thank God. The next day, I was in the Busch Xfinity car, and we started the race. And you, if I don't know if you remember, but when you used to get out of the Cup car and get in the Xfinity car, it was like 10 miles an hour slower, but it felt like you had no power. It just everything happened slow. And I remember we started the race, and I drove into turn 3, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a bump right there. I see it, and I started going around it. And I should have won the Busch race that day, I think. Like it was my motor blew up, but I had a really fast car in the Busch race. Well, then we got to go do happy hour in the Cup car, and I was pretty fast because I was going. They're like, "Oh, you're going around the bump now," and I'm like, "Well, I don't really want to tell them that I didn't know there was a bump there for a
Yeah.
while." But it just all clicked, and I mean, no expectation of being able to win that race, but yeah, like it was. Yeah, that's a fun memory. Yeah.
When that was over, and you're going home, at Charlotte, we always live around that area. In those days, you got 200,000 people. Well, maybe not when you won. Definitely that kind of stopped around 2006, but it was always hard to get out of the Charlotte Motor
Yeah.
Speedway. When you won that race and you're trying to make your way to wherever you live, which is locally, uh, what happened after the race? Did you go anywhere? Did you go home? What did you think? Did the phone calls start the next day? How did it transfer?
I All I remember after the race was being in victory lane, and they put Sterling on a phone call with me, like a cell
Oh
phone.
wow, wow.
And I remember, and I haven't watched any of that. I haven't watched that back in forever, so I don't know what I said. But I remember in the moment being like, be humble, like, because this guy's at home with a broken neck, like, and you got in his car, and there's no driver. I don't care what any driver says, everybody wants to see the next guy fail in their car. Like it's
Absolutely.
just the reality of it. And I'm like, here I am, a guy that's never won a bush race. I've never won a truck race. I get in Sterling's car. This car's led the championship up to this point, and I win. And he's at home with a broken neck. And I just remember like, I just remember like trying to come across like just grateful because I was, but also I was thinking more about Sterling than I was about myself in that moment. You know,
Yes.
that's all I remember afterwards. I don't remember the car ride home. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah. That's an awesome moment to remember. I want to talk to you about that scenario. I felt that. Uh, I'm driving in an Xfinity race at Darlington. Steve Park gets hurt, and my career's going okay. But Steve Park gets hurt in the Xfinity race. They asked me to drive the Pennzoil car. It saves my career. I mean, the very next day, I start dead last, and I'm driving this Pennzoil car straight to the front, all the way up close to the
Hmm.
lead, and then it breaks. But then Mark Martin said something to me, and this is where I'm getting with this. I started set quick time at Rockingham, run second. So what you just mentioned, Mark Martin said to me, he looked at me, goes, Herman, you got to have a good car in the Cup Series. And boy,
Yeah.
it just shocked me, like, oh my God, will I ever get in a good Cup car? Because if I don't get in a good Cup car, then my career will never be what I want it to be.
Right.
So in that moment that you're talking about with Sterling, did it ever register you that, hey, I got to have a good car? And then getting hooked up with Chip and Roush. Tell me about, did you ever think you were so great that you could just drive through an ill handling car?
Oh, no, I would say confidence would have been my weakness my whole career was, thinking that I had the ability to to do it. I mean, I really only had 1 year in my whole career, 2010, that every single weekend when I showed up, I'm like, we might win this weekend. Like there were a few tracks that we went to that we weren't very good at, but for the most part, every weekend I felt that way. But I would say there was not really any other year that I mean, like, I just felt like I didn't deserve to be there most of the time. Like, it's just the reality of it because I wanted to do better.
You are an incredibly talented race car driver. You're very good. That's why you won the 2015 Rolex at Daytona as a team driver. So
Yeah.
it's a fact that you're a very talented race car driver. So let's fast forward right now to these days. Um, I'd like to spend more time with you, but I know you're working
Yeah.
for Fox. We're going to get to that.
I
But
know. I think it's so funny because you're interviewing me, and then in about an hour and a half, I'm gonna be interviewing somebody else.
yeah, well, we're paying it forward. We're
Yeah.
paying it forward. Okay, so now we go from your era, where if this cup car is not right, I don't have any chance. You know,
Right.
I got to have I in your day, if your cup team did not have an advantage, you most likely weren't going to win. So the bodies had to be put on right. And if they weren't on right, you were pushing, you were loose. And now here we are today where everybody's car is identical. And now we're seeing guys, listen, he's a good race car driver. Michael McDowell, he's winning now. But it's almost like these guys had to get into equal cars to show their talent.
Yeah,
Tell me
I think
about
that's
this.
no, I think that's so fair. The one thing that I loved about the past is that if you were way off, you talk about the bodies. I mean, you just would cut the whole body off and start over. And you know what I
That
mean? Like,
day,
I mean, that's what you did. Yeah. And I mean and it was a fun time because you might struggle at Charlotte and they're like, well, we're going to put a different body build on. And it could change everything about the car, right? I mean, it's a totally different car. Where today, it's a pretty small box that all those guys have to work with. But I mean, I just think that and I'm not as optimistic as you, I don't think, in life, but I'm super optimistic that the same people still win. Like you put Kyle Larson in a car in 2000, he's going to win. You put him in the car in 20 more years, he's probably still going to win because he's just a
yeah,
really good driver and he does all the small things. I mean, he's really talented, but he does everything correct. And even though they're in a smaller box now, you just still see the same. I mean, you do have every once in a while a little bit of an outlier, but the same good drivers still win.
That really showed up with Kyle Busch in the truck race, or was it the Xfinity race at Atlanta? He
Truck
was
race, yeah.
leading that. Yeah, he was leading that truck race, and they were just all over him. And he had to mirror drive more than he did front. I
He,
think that was
yeah.
incredible.
Well, when I watched the truck race with him, and I loved that type of racing, the drafting and all that. And this isn't a to put anyone else down, but you could tell Kyle's experience. Like
Oh yeah.
you could just watch and you're like, he's having so much fun right now because it's like, it's like going to the kart track and you get to have the fastest kart, right? I mean, like he was
He knew what
thinking like,
moves to make.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was thinking 20 seconds ahead of everybody else. And it was I got to assume that he had to just that had to be as much fun as he could have in a vehicle. That was good.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay. Um, you had an incredible Cup career, NASCAR Cup career, Xfinity trucks. Wow, 799. Why didn't you stop at
I
800?
don't know. I don't know. Todd Bodine wore me out for like 3 years at the studio. Like, go run one more race. I'm like, I just don't care. Who cares? It's just a number.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did. I remember he
That's
ran.
why he was wearing me out because he went to, I don't know, what number do you want to get to? 1,000 or something? I don't know what it
It was
was.
a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't even know I was at 799.
yeah. Well, I didn't know it either until I added it all up,
Yeah.
and there it was. But it is cool. And NASCAR, Jamie. NASCAR is going to promote what they want to promote. And so maybe 15, 20 years ago, they started doing that.
Yeah.
Mark Martin has 1,000 Cup starts.
Yep.
Michael Waltrip, they started talking about the totality of how many times you put that helmet on, how many times you got in that race car. But I mean, we're just rounded off. Does your ass ever feel like you ran 800 NASCAR races?
No, it's really crazy to me when you say that to think that I've raced that much because I don't. I mean, I remember like there was a time when I feel like there was an era from like 2002 to 2005 that it wasn't cool to run the Bush race if you were a Cup driver. You remember that?
Mm,
Like I feel like Jeff Gordon, he never ran the Bush. You know what I mean? Like if he did it, it was special, and he was probably getting paid $1 gazillion to do it.
yeah.
But it was like, but then there was that time like with Harvick and Carl, Kyle Busch, like all of a sudden they were just running all of them, and then it was like, well, it's okay now. Like I don't know. I just remember, and so then I did a few more, like especially at Roush, like they had all those Xfinity teams that you could go run each weekend. And it was fun to get to do both of them each weekend. I loved getting to do that. I mean, you get to do 2 races in one weekend. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because you're a lot younger than me. You're 48, I'm 61. In my era, I was racing against Dale Earnhardt Sr., Harry Gant, Mark
Yeah.
Martin, and the legendary Winn-Dixie Ford. So, like, it was at that time, it was cool. I like what you said here, and I kind of forgot about that. It was a necessity in my era, and then it wasn't because Jeff Gordon wasn't doing it. And then all of
Right.
a sudden it became a necessity. So that's what they mean when we have to pay attention to history. It repeats itself.
Yeah, it does for sure. Yeah, I mean I don't know, like if I could go back, I would have run more Xfinity races. Like I would have done that more weekends. But then as like around, I don't remember, 2013, 14, budgets got tight and there just wasn't the money for everybody to go. I mean,
Yes.
there was a time that, I mean, if you wanted to run one, you could, and then budgets just got tighter and there just wasn't the partnerships to go do all that.
Yeah. And then Kyle Busch ruined it for everybody. He
I
won
know.
so much. The
It was
fans
unbelievable.
complained so much. Kyle Busch does not deserve to be in Xfinity. He's too
Right.
good. So then they outlawed it.
Yeah,
And
I
what
viewed
is it?
that differently though, Kenny. I when I was like my first couple of years of Xfinity, I loved it when the Cup guys were there because you get to
Me
race with
too.
them. Like,
Oh,
I'm
I'm the
like,
same way you are.
man, like, I loved it when Matt Kenseth would come race, like, you're like, "Well, that's who I wanna race on Sunday, so, yeah, I want him to be in the race today." I thought it was great.
Yeah, and this is a conversation between two racers. My
Yeah,
favorite win of my life was I looked up in the mirror at Richmond. Of course, I was nervous as all get up, but I was looking at Dale Senior's bubble goggles and Mark Martin, and
it's crazy.
my favorite win. So that's I agree with you. Just an example of
Yeah.
when you outrun those guys, it
Yeah, it was
matters.
more
You know,
special. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw this in now because it seems like a good time to do it. You and I were at Circuit of the America, and we, 8:30 in the morning, and I looked at you, and my God, you are an athlete. You got zero stomach. You're chiseled out, and I bring this up now because of all the races you ran. Jamie, you're a damn athlete. I mean, this athleticism. Is this a nervous energy? Were you bored? First of all, I think it's fantastic. I'm bragging on you.
Yeah.
But tell me about this athleticism. And right now, you look like you're 22.
Well, I appreciate that because I don't feel like I look like that. So this is what I'll tell you about running. I was never a runner. My last year of Cup, Josh Wise started his program, which is
Mm.
incredibly successful now. And Larson and I were his first two like drivers. And Josh introduced me to running, which I used to always tell everyone, well, my knees can't take that. I'm not a runner. I
Any
just
excuse.
it's just what everybody says, right? I meet people every day that tell me that now. And Josh got me to running, and it just became something that I became kind of passionate about. I was like, I think I want to do a marathon. So then I went and did a marathon, and as soon as it was over, I'm like, I'll never do this again. And like a week later, I signed up for another one because I man, this is gonna sound really messed up, but I love pain. Like I
Mm.
love pushing myself so hard that I'm miserable and I want to enjoy that the next day of what I did. And it's really messed up, but I enjoy that. The other thing with running was when I first stopped driving, that became how I was competitive. Like I didn't get
Mm.
to have racing, so I would do these marathons, and even though I knew I would never win one, I could always finish in like the top 10, which was just huge, right? I mean, I go there and I'm not a runner, and there was always like two people from Kenya that I'm like, well, shit, I got no chance outrunning that guy ever, right?
Hundreds of people.
Yeah. So anyway, I loved it. And then running now though, I don't really care about ever doing a marathon. I listen to a lot of podcasts for work. And I run about an hour and a half a day. And I just put a
Gosh,
podcast in, whether it's like, I mean, I listen to obviously everything that Dirty Mo has. I listen to, I mean, maybe it's Joe Rogan, maybe it's, I just listen to different podcasts. But I think it helps me a little bit for work because Kenny, I have an opinion on everything that happens on Saturday or Sunday. Like you do too, right? If there's a wreck, you're like, it's his fault, it's his fault. Like whatever it is, should they suspend him? Should they not? You automatically have an opinion. But I really enjoy listening to everyone else's opinion because sometimes they say something that, like with my wife, that I'm like, I didn't see it that way, but I do now. And so I think it helps me in TV to always kind of see the other side of a story.
I like that because I do
Yeah.
Herman Schrader with Kenny
Yeah.
Schrader, and Schrader does not like opinions. And I'm like, Kenny, it's a lesson in how to view other
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
I love the way you just put that because we might go, he wrecked him. Well, hold on, he got loose getting in.
Right.
You, you
Yeah,
know,
there's always more to it, right?
yeah, yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So, tell me about when I was checking up on you. What did you do at Mount Mitchell?
So they have I was kind of into cycling for a while. Josh was really into that, so we would go do it as a group of people. And they had this 100-mile bike race. You run 70 miles from Spartanburg, South Carolina to the base of Mount Mitchell, and then it's 30 miles up Mount Mitchell, so it's a 100-mile race.
Oh
But the
my.
first like 23 miles up Mount Mitchell, it's pretty steep, like you're going pretty slow, but the last 7 when you climb the summit, you like literally have to swerve back and forth like up the road because it's so steep.
Because
And
your
it
legs are tore up.
Oh, you're just on fire. And it takes like 5.5 hours.
Wow.
And like I think 5 hours won it. Probably like I don't know, maybe 8 hours is the slow. So it's a long event. But again, it was just one of those like I don't know. I did it twice, and I just thought I was a buffoon both times doing it because it's so hard. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I would never do
Well,
it. I'm not really into cycling anymore. I watched a couple people get hit on bikes, and so
mm,
I got rid of all my cycling stuff, and I just run now.
yeah. Well, I just I knew you were very athletic, and I want to give a shout out to Matt Kenseth too.
Oh
But
yeah.
when I saw you at 8:30 that morning last week, I was like, holy moly.
Well,
Um,
let me tell you my incentive on that. When I was 16 or 17, I was kind of chubby, right? Like just, you're
oh,
just a
so you
kid
don't
growing
ever
up.
want to be
And
fat.
and no, listen, and so I had that same driver's license forever, the picture. And I
Yeah.
remember going like somewhere, like the bank or something, to deposit a check, and they needed my ID, and the lady kind of looked at me and then looked up, and she's like, "Ooh, you've lost a lot of weight." And I was like,
Oh,
"Damn!"
wow.
I was like, "I didn't know that I used to be chubby, right?" And so jokingly, I always think about that because I'm like, well, I don't ever want that bank teller to think I'm chubby again. So yeah,
But you know what? That's funny because I said something to Denny Hamlin and I thought I was being funny. I'm talking 20 years ago, Denny Hamlin and myself were at the Luxor in Vegas and
yeah.
we're playing roulette and Denny is just becoming a cup driver. And guys are being guys and we're drinking beer and I said something about his belly. And I'm telling you 1 year ago, 20 years later,
He
he
reminded
brings
you.
that he brings that up to me and I'm like, "Oh my god." So, I want to say that I hear you loud and clear about that bank teller because isn't it
Yeah,
amazing the things that
yeah,
affect us in life and it stings us and we don't know it. We do know it, but we
yeah.
20 years later, um, yeah, and Denny's always been good. He's good to me. Denny Hamlin, he sends me tennis shoes, and I think he likes me, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I pissed him off. I don't
Oh
know.
no, that's really funny. He was obviously sensitive about that.
Yeah,
That's
but
good.
okay. Well, we're gonna end like this. You've been so kind, and this has been long overdue. You're in. I keep bragging on you because I believe this. I'm not going to say anything false. You are so good at TV. Uh, Everybody bragged on you. I mean, everybody in the sport, they were getting on all social media. When you first started doing TV, they said, Jamie McMurray is well spoken. He needs to be in the booth for the main cup races. Um, and you're young. And listen, I know Fox better than anybody. I worked there 15 years. They love the drivers that have the stats.
Yeah.
You got the Daytona 500 win. You got the Brickyard 400 win. They encourage you to wear your championship rings. Eric Shanks and Ullman, they told me that stuff. So you have all their credentials. When did it start? When did they come to you? How did they call you?
I don't remember how that all went down. I remember being at Homestead and Steve Craddock came
Oh
over to my
yeah,
motorhome. I think that the agency that I had represent me at the time asked me about doing TV because honestly, Kenny, I always thought when I stopped driving that I would be like Ricky Rudd and I was just gonna
mm,
go hide somewhere and just never be seen again. Like I was totally okay with that. And they suggested maybe they were starting the studio. You remember when they started this studio in Charlotte, this big green room, and they were going to
yeah.
get rid of the Hollywood Hotel, and they were going to have the pre-race shows there, which we did for 6 years. We had that, and I don't know. Like I came in, I did a couple of hubs and TV, and I don't know how it is or how it was for you. It's pretty fun. Like there's a little bit of a rush that comes with, especially, I mean, the booth, like the Xfinity races we're doing now on CW. It's it's pretty. I mean, it's almost like you're getting to race again,
Yeah.
but there's no consequences and there's no points. And I don't know, like it's pretty fun. Like and I like the balance that I have right now because I'm doing the Fox pre-race show on Sunday and then the Xfinity booth on Saturday. So I'm kind of getting to do a different role. And I think you would say like it's fun to do something different, right? Like you don't ever just want to be like just the pit reporter or just, just pre-race, like to get to kind of move around some different roles. It's a good balance. I like it.
Well, I do have experience in this because they did move me all around. It started out,
Yeah.
that NASCAR race day fueled by Sunoco. Then it was like, hey, we want you to interview Dale Jr. We had no idea you could interview people. The rush for me was when we were doing, big shows. We were getting a million. You remember
Right.
the speed days. Well, they say, okay, we're going live. 5, 4, 3, and you're like, damn. We've been looking at these ratings. We've been getting 1 million viewers. To me, that was that moment. Make sure your phone's on silent. Look at
Right.
yourself one more time because uh, did you find a rush when they counted you down?
Well, I'll tell you my story real quick. So I like to understand the way things work.
Yeah.
So I would go, like when we were at the studio, I would go in the control room
Oh.
and just watch everything and try to
Mm.
understand, because sometimes you get mad, like when you're out on the set, like, well, why would they do that? And so instead of getting mad, I would go and I would ask questions and try to learn, like, what's a director's role, like what's the producer, why do we do things, right? And I just would be nosy. So, Adam Alexander and I he's become a great friend of mine, and was somebody within the TV industry that I really valued his opinion, because when we would get out on set, he would say things and I'm like, well, why is he saying that? Like, why does he think we need to worry about this? And then the show would start happening and I'm like, I get it now, right? And so the more you can understand something, the easier it is. So I went to Fox and I was like, I want to host Race Hub. Like
Oh.
I want to like host a show, because what would happen was, I don't remember why, but we would have like some different hosts come in because someone couldn't show up. And I was like, when you get in like the summertime on Hub, people are going on vacation and it's just hard to make everyone's schedules work. And so I went to Lindsay, who was running the studio, and I was like, "Could I host a couple of shows?" Like, because we talked about some different things, and I'm like, "I just want to host Hub." And they're like, "Okay." So Shannon Spake, who was another one of the hosts, she really helped me. Like, she showed me her process and I'm telling you, the host, that role is 100 times harder than the analyst. Like, there's just understanding all the traffic of everything that's going to happen. So anyway, Shannon showed me her process, and Kenny, I bet I worked like 100 hours to do this one show, right? To understand everything that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've never really been nervous to do TV. I was like, I am so nervous.
So
So,
nervous.
so I got out, and that green room, it's just a big green room and you're standing all by yourself, and you can't see anybody else. It's just you, right? And so I'm standing there, and we did rehearsals, and rehearsals were, I think, just a disaster. I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're gonna let me come on and host this show, because it's gonna be it." I'm like, "It's gonna be terrible."
Yep.
And I knew it. Like, I knew that I was getting ready to just botch the hell out of Race Hub. So, anyway, I'm standing there, and John Morris, you remember John Morris?
Oh, J-Mo.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
he's
Jay,
down in Texas now
yeah,
with
yeah.
PBR. Yeah.
Yeah, so JMo's producing, and I can tell he knows I'm nervous. He's like, "Oh, Jamie, you're gonna be fine." And you can hear the Race Hub music come on, and it's a solo of me to start, and I hear the, 5, 4,
There it is.
and
Yeah.
I my Kenny, my tongue is stuck to the roof of my mouth, and I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to talk. Like, I was, I mean, like, I was like this, like, and sweat was just running down my back, and all I wanted to do was run and hide. I'm like,
Yes, yes, yes,
I just
yes.
don't want to be out here. And it worked out. I mean, like, you do
Yeah.
that, and I wish I hadn't taken it so serious and just laughed a little more with it.
Oh,
But I would say in TV, I don't really get nervous. That, oh, sheesh,
yeah.
it's tough. It's
Yeah.
brutal.
What
Yeah.
what I think about right away is you and I don't talk that much, but a couple years ago, you made a point to seek me out somewhere. And you said, hey, I really like that video you did, Kenny.
The
Show
tires.
the
It was
tires.
was
And
yeah.
yeah, and at that moment I thought, oh, Jamie's a gadgeteer.
Mhm.
That's what I call people like you. And now this conversation just proves it that you want to know, you want to experience. And I think that's fantastic because now you understand everybody's viewpoint.
Right.
Now you know why they're on you to do this because they
Sure.
got to do that. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Jamie,
Yeah.
listen, man, you've been fantastic. And I know that you got to go to Joe Gibbs right now and do TV.
Yeah.
I know you're doing everything now, NASCAR on Fox and all that, but boy, that CW logo, I like it. It's black with the red CW. It's a good
Yep.
looking logo. Congratulations on everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, thanks. It's been I feel really blessed, Kenny, because when TV changed this year, right? Like there's 5 partners now. I mean, we're traditionally it was always Fox and NBC or Fox and ESPN. It's changed, and you just don't know where you're going to end up in that. And so I'm so thankful that that NASCAR and CW allowed me to go do the booth, because I've wanted to do that forever, and that's been a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, like, I consider myself a Fox guy because I've been there. This is my 7th year of doing Fox, and that's such a great group of people to get to be with every weekend. And the one thing for me this year, and I think you would agree with me on this, I haven't traveled in 6 years. Like, I mean, I went to
Mm.
like one race while I'm traveling this year, and I forgot how hard that is.
Oh,
I forgot, man, the week is short, and then you're in a different hotel every weekend. And that's why, like, you become sympathetic to, like, these crew guys and people that travel. They're like, I just want to be at home. And I get it, because it's way easier to stay at home than it is to travel.
Jamie, I walked in Steve Craddock's office and I said, "Thank you. You've been so good to me, but I cannot do one more commercial airport." And people questioned. They thought I got fired, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"Look, I'm in those hotel rooms by myself.
I know.
My
It's
wife don't
hard.
go with. I'm watching my friends run their dirt cars. So you're young, enjoy it." Um, and I think we'll end just like that. Uh,
Okay.
Jamie McMurray, thank you so much for being on Kenny Conversation. And remember, everybody, this is on the Dirty Mo podcast, or you can, if you want to see Jamie's beautiful face, you can go over here on YouTube. And, hey, if you're running, you can put the earbuds in and listen to Jamie on Dirty Mo podcast.
I
And if
like
you
it.
want to, yeah, or you can see you right here on the Kenny Wallace YouTube show. Jamie McMurray, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kenny.
Goodbye, everybody. Until the next Kenny Conversation.